How's it going, people? Jack here with another video here to check out some more from the Kurskazak channel for some more informational content here, where we're going to be talking about Project Sundial and whom I can only consider to be one of the greatest villains this world has ever known, and perhaps who could have been its last. Now look, let me preface with this, but I want to say that every single country has had a very monumental individual that has contributed something great to this world, and of course another one who has done the opposite. Like, let's stick to Europe because that's the continent where I live in, where I have most of my knowledge. If you have the likes of Italy, right, you would have Benito Mussolini, who gave us fascismo, right? Fascism, and inevitably contributed to the axis of power. And on the flip side of that, we will have the likes of Enrico Fermi, who is essentially he was called the atomic pope. Like, he was the father of atomic fusion, or rather said fission, as he proposed to use that to trigger the fusion process to create atomic energy, but later on, of course, was used for atomic bombs. If we look at Germany, we have the angry mustache model, who would of course be counted with the likes of Albert Einstein, right? But then, not always as mentioned throughout history, we have Hungary, who have had one of the most monumental figures in history in the fields of pediatrics, and that would be Ignaz Semmelweis, right? The savior of mothers. An amazing man who is essentially the reason as to why we're washing our hands with sanitizers and why women are giving birth correctly in hospitals today. So he was awesome, but was recognized way too late. Past his death, he lived around the late 1800s. But if he was the Hungarian hero, the villain will be Edward Teller. This man was truly unhinged, and I'm gonna let Kurskazak explain to us how he came about.
In the 1950s, the US began the top-secret project Sundial. Most of it is still classified. The goal? A single nuclear bomb so powerful it would destroy all of human civilization. Conceived in cold logic from the mind of a genius scientist. Sundial had the energy equivalent of 10 billion tons of TNT, a pyramid of explosives 13 times taller than the actual Great Pyramid, 3,000 more than all the bombs dropped during World War II. If you dropped the bomb that destroyed Hiroshima every minute, it would take you over 15 months to match Sundial. How was it even possible for us to achieve this insane level of madness? Everything is different forever.
That is insane to put that as a representation. 15 months. Mind you, a lot of things that have been written in Project Sundials are still classified, right? We can find some quotes here and there of the conversations. That is, for an example, how it is that we know just how unhinged Teller was in his attempt to create the super. That was what it was dubbed, the bomb there. But wow.
Let's set the stage. If you were 40 in 1945, that means you were born in 1905. Back then, monarchs ruled over much of the world, only 3% of homes in the US had electricity, cities were dominated by horses, the first experimental planes had just flown. Less than 100,000 soldiers died in war each year. Imagine growing up in this world and seeing change almost too fast to keep up with. By 1945, 24 million soldiers and 50 million civilians had died in 2 world wars. And suddenly, there were TVs, microwaves, jet planes, and nuclear bombs. They kind of broke the brains of the people alive back then.
Yeah, that is insane to think about. Like, today, we're all dictating the growth of our cellular devices and all the technological advancement through Moore's law. How it is that every single transistors and IC are going to be integrated into something, and how quickly that can expand. But the actual massive changes that truly were revolutionary were that back then, you could actually see the physical changes all the time. It was massive and scary, I would imagine.
Overnight, nowhere from the edge of space to the bottom of the ocean was safe. It's hard for us today to understand the level of terror this instilled in people. The implications were wild. Without nuclear weapons, it seemed you'd stand no chance in future conflicts. Nations without that power would get trampled by those that did have it, no matter how big their armies were. There was one brief moment where it could all have been stopped. In 1946, the US proposed the Baruch Plan and promised to get rid of their atom bombs, share nuclear technology with the world, and set up an international authority to make sure no one ever built such weapons again.
I think it's also very important for people to understand just how revolutionary nuclear weapons were at the time. Because if we're talking about like 1905, warfare had been led through explosives, right? Rudimentary explosive for more than 500 years at that point. Like, we are talking about stuff like generated through gunpowder, right? A mixture of black powder, some sulfur, some charcoal, all integrated there. The things that the Professor Newtonium of every single country was including through the compounds to create explosives. That was until nuclear physics entered the fold. Because unlike the relatively simpler process of deflagration, which is usually what we are calling the process of you rearranging the chemical compounds and breaking down the bonds that, let's say, the black powder and the other material that are combined with it generate when they are rearranged upon ignition, which in turn, because of the difference between the density of the gas, i.e. the atmosphere around you, and the solid, create high pressure and high temperature. The process of doing that was relatively simple, where this time around what you had to do was actually break down subatomic forces, like push the electrostatic forces that were shielding the lighter hydrogen atom to form the much heavier helium one. And that was a hell of a piece of engineering that needed to be achieved in order to make that, and a hell of a lot of energy. Because processes like that, what we later on will call fusion, was usually only found in the freaking sun. Yet that is how that burning spirit bomb keeps on burning. So that was the thing that puzzled a lot of scientists at the time, right? You had individuals like Hans Bertha from Germany, who created a water method that the Manhattan Project will end up inevitably using later on. You have the aforementioned Enrico Fermi, who proposed the use of fission to trigger the fusion process. Now, of course, and with them reaching around the 1940s, you have like this collective of scientists moving to the US, either fleeing their home countries because of the events of World War II, fascism and authoritarianism following them along, and they go to the US, form the Manhattan Project, and start working on this weapon here. And of course, there are some who got the benefit to actually go there, but wanted to do a bit more than what they bargained for.
But the military advantage of nuclear bombs was too great to let go. Just 3 years later, the Soviet Union detonated their first atom bomb.
I know that I've been pausing a little bit here. The thing with the bird was kind of genius, because, you know, giving the dove carrying the olive branch, or just a branch, is supposed to symbolize peace, right? A clever editing.
But the military advantage of nuclear bombs was too great to let go. Just 3 years later, the Soviet Union detonated their first atom bomb. This caught everyone by complete surprise. The Soviets were not decades behind American technology, but had just pulled even. Shock turned into fear, and fear makes people do crazy things. The whole concept of what war was and how it would be won was overturned in a hot second. In a world where your enemy could fly over your soldiers and vaporize your cities, the only answer seemed to be a nuclear arsenal that could strike faster and harder. The nuclear arms race began. In 1946, there were just 9 nuclear bombs in the world. In 1950, the number was 300. In 1960, it would be 20,000. In a way, the nuclear arms race was pretty daft. One superpower would develop a powerful new bomb and detonate it, and then the other side would build something more powerful and blow it up, and this would continue endlessly. A dirty and wasteful game of creating more and more horror that seemed totally reasonable at the time. Superpowers spent trillions to have thousands of the most intelligent people show off how hard they could destroy humanity. Fear had to be met with much greater horrors, and one man knew how to make nightmares real. But what if we destroy humanity even harder?
The threat of a nuclear deterrent, where the deterrent itself is the destruction of the entire world. See, in 1942, actually, a good mention before we dive into this guy, all of the aforementioned scientists, including the likes of Einstein and Oppenheimer, the would-be destroyer of worlds, had to form the S1 committee. Was it divisional committee? I do believe it was the S1 committee made by President Roosevelt at the time, who created that explicitly for them to create a nuclear bomb. Now, and that was with regards to, of course, the fission design. But this guy wanted to do more. He wanted to focus on fusion, which was the rather long process, but to him it was like, it's just an engineering challenge. We can push through that. It's not a problem. Eventually, we'll get to do the big one. And I say specifically big one because the thing with fission is that it had an upper limitation, right? As I said, the process is not as slow as it does with the sun, right? It needs to happen fast. And triggering that fission process, because the time frame within which the fuel within the core of the weapon could undergo fission would be extremely short, and that before even making the thing explode. So it would be the equivalent of like trying to fire your musket, and before the gas actually reaches the bullet or the projectile, the barrel just explodes. You can't have that. So they had an upper limitation of how explosive their weapon could be, but Mr. Here wanted to have the big one. And Robert Oppenheimer, who was charged to be the coordinator of rapid rupture, yes, that was his title at the time, assigned all of these people with a specific strength and knowledge to do one thing or the other. His task was to just continue researching on the fusion. And he did.
Edward Teller was a brilliant Hungarian theoretical physicist. He was among the first people to realize that the fission chain reaction in uranium could make a bomb, and he helped to build it. But for Teller, the bombs were not powerful enough. He was ready to pay any price for security, and to be more secure, to be less afraid, he urged that larger bombs were the answer. Even in the 1950s, this was a pretty hot take, and many scientists were appalled by his ideas. He didn't care one bit and incessantly lobbied scared politicians to greenlight more devastating nuclear weapons. And lucky for him, his timing was just right. Terrified by the rapid nuclear progress of the Soviet Union, he got a blank check from the military to bring his most destructive fantasy to life. It took him only a few years to make them a reality: the hydrogen bomb. A hydrogen bomb is so powerful that it needs a regular atom bomb just to trigger it.
Yeah.
It's basically a nuke, the first stage next to a capsule of fusion fuel, the second stage encased by dense materials like lead. When the atom bomb is detonated, it releases ungodly amounts of X-rays that get channeled onto the capsule. The capsule's surface explodes, pushing inwards and compressing the fusion fuel so violently that for a brief moment it simulates a star.
Yep.
When this bomb was first tested in 1952, it instantly erased a Pacific island from the map.
Oh, no. Okay. As I can read it, 2 years later was Bikini Atoll. I thought that Bikini Atoll was the first one.
2 years later, he tested an even bigger nuke, 1,000 times more powerful than the Hiroshima bomb. The world recoiled in horror. With weapons this powerful, war stopped being about winning, and total human annihilation became very real. Teller celebrated. In just 2 years, he had enabled the creation of American warheads 100 times more powerful.
It's important to note that the people who were part of the committee, that after seeing Hiroshima, what had happened when they dropped both bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they got scared of their own creations. Like, one thing was that Oppenheimer was scared that he would ignite all of the hydrogen in the air, but that obviously did not happen. But things were so scary that even the Energy Commission, which they all became part of, actually pleaded the US government to not follow through with all of these projects, because it was that scary. Like, it was both the likes of Enrico Fermi, like a whole bunch of them wrote such things, but I think specifically Enrico Fermi and Isidore Rabi, who wrote some very straightforward statement of this is going to be genocide. Actually, you know what? Let me find the quotes. I think that the Atomic Heritage Foundation might have some quotes on that. Here we go. Here we have Bertha. And if we scroll a bit further down, here he is, Isidore. Isidore Rabi, what does he say? A final point that needs to be stressed is that many tests may be required, therefore a workable model has been evolved. Oh, that's not the part that I'm looking for. It is clear that the use of this weapon would bring about the destruction, I apologize, of innumerable human lives. It is not a weapon which can be used exclusively for the destruction of material installation of military or semi-military purposes. Its use, therefore, carries much further than the atomic bomb itself, the policy of exterminating civilian population. And of course, the members of the advisory committee are pleading them to stop the development of such thing. And I think the even more straightforward quote is stated here in the start. A decision on the proposal that an all-out effort be undertaken for the development of the super, which was the name of it, cannot, in our opinion, be separated from consideration of broad national policy. Necessarily, such a weapon goes far beyond any military objective and enters the range of very great natural catastrophe. By its very nature, it cannot be confined to a military objective, but becomes a weapon which, in practical effect, is almost one of genocide. And this is both from Enrico Fermi and Isidore Rabi. Who, I mean, they said that outright. Like, if you're doing this, we're gonna wipe away the world.
He had stolen the nuclear fire from the gods and awoken cosmic horrors, but he insisted that it was still not enough. His dream was to have a bomb of almost unlimited power. And once again, his timing was pretty great. When the Soviet Union detonated its own hydrogen bomb, it sparked a new wave of fear. This is where we get the top-secret Project Sundial, the bomb to make all other bombs irrelevant. The final bomb. Teller skipped right to the end of the nuclear arms race. He wanted to build a world destroyer, something so breathtakingly destructive, so incredibly scary that it made no sense to continue playing. Almost everything about it is still classified, but what we do know about it is terrifying. Work on it actually began, and tests were planned.
The babushka of bombs. A bomb within a bomb within a bomb. Exhibit will be happy to look at that.
Sundial wouldn't be some warhead loaded up onto a bomber and dropped on a target. No, it would be a backyard bomb. After all, if a bomb can destroy the world, why bother moving it at all? No need to bring it close to your enemies, you could as well just put it in your backyard. Maybe it would have actually been put in the center of the country, maybe it would have been put on a remote island or stored on a ship. We don't know what the actual plans were. But this underlines how insane this weapon was and that Teller knew exactly what he was proposing. In his mind, the rationale was the ultimate deterrence. If you attack us or our allies, we will destroy the world. On a technical level, his concept was not even that complicated. It was probably some kind of nuclear matryoshka doll. The truly breathtaking thing is the idea itself and that he actually attempted to make it real. From what we know, Sundial would have weighed at least 2,000 tons, as massive as a 250-meter-long cargo train.
Yikes.
It would explode with the power of at least 10 billion tons of TNT, a number so big it doesn't mean anything anymore. So let's make this a bit more graphic and explode it in Nevada. One wild thing about it is that humanity never tested anything remotely like it, so this is the best speculation we developed together with experts. For a brief moment, a fireball of pure energy appears, up to 50 kilometers in diameter, larger than the visible horizon. It radiates blistering heat at the speed of light. Everything within 400 kilometers is instantly set on fire. Every tree, house, person. The energy would reach much further, but the explosion is so big that the Earth's horizon curves away from it. The surrounding deserts turn into a field of glass. Then comes the blast wave. The atmosphere above the explosion is violently shot into space. A magnitude 9 earthquake shakes the United States, while the sound of the blast reverberates around the world.
This is the third time this month that I'm seeing the Statue of Liberty being obliterated. We had Cloverfield, Sharknado, and now Edward Teller.
North American forests burn, adding their soot to the bomb's radioactive fallout to create toxic death clouds that shroud the world like a dark curtain. Sundial is like a nuclear war happening all at once. but it's more like a giant volcano erupting or an asteroid striking than a nuclear war. Sundial would bring about an apocalyptic nuclear winter where global temperatures suddenly drop by 10 degrees Celsius, most water sources would be contaminated, and crops would fail everywhere. Most people in the world would die. So, congratulations,
Yeah.
you won. Good news. Wait, no, bad news.
I
The
was
good
about to
news
say.
is that Sundial was never built. Most details are still top secret, but we know that scientists reacted with horror and politicians who were secretly informed responded with disbelief. Even the US military thought this was a bit much.
When even the US goes like, nah, man, we're not doing this. It's too much war. The war to end all war. We're going to go out of business, my dude.
In the insane world of nuclear arms, this madness was too much. Building it considered a crime against humanity. And it had other problems too. A single apocalypse weapon leaves you no wiggle room. Would you press the button if enemy soldiers crossed a distant country's borders or attacked one of your distant bases? Would you end the world if your rival overthrew a friendly government? Can
Right.
you protect an ally with a bomb that would kill them too? The elephant in the room is that while Sundial is clearly insane, humanity still kind of did build it. At the peak of the Cold War, humanity had over 70,000 nukes. Even today, we still have about 12,000 nuclear weapons, enough to destroy human civilization. Instead of a single world burner, the superpowers built tens of thousands of nuclear weapons of all types and sizes, hidden in submarines or waiting in bunkers and silos. And this sounds so much more reasonable, doesn't it? But this also makes them a much more credible threat. Because if people feel they can risk setting off a smaller nuke, they might actually get launched. And we don't know what kind of chain reaction this might trigger. So in reality, the difference between Sundial and what we have today is not even that big. Humanity didn't build a doomsday bomb, but a doomsday machine. Today, the world may be on the verge of another nuclear arms race. The US is on track to spend $1 trillion on nuclear modernization programs, while China
Yeah, I mean, on one end, one could say that it's a good thing because it means that there are more security measures preventing it from going off. But on the other hand, though, it could be a bad thing because there are now possibly more reasons as to why those security measures could be breached. For some of you who remember, there was some time ago where some nuclear bases were still found to be processed through, like the activation of which, at least, were processed through the use of floppy disks still. It's a positive thing, right? Because it's not going through means of internet and God knows what else could affect them. But again,
China is expanding its arsenal and might have more than 1,000 nuclear weapons ready to be deployed by 2030. So far, we've escaped the existential threat these weapons pose, but if an alien visited Earth, it might ask us if we're okay and need a hug. We should ask ourselves as a species if we really want to be ready to destroy ourselves at a moment's notice. That was a lot. Science is never inherently good or bad. It's up to us to use our sense of curiosity and exploration for something positive. If you want to impart this spirit onto the kids in your life from early on, our sponsor KiwiCo is a great start.
now I do apologize, Kusan, for not watching the ad through, but do check KiwiCo if you would feel so inclined to. This was a maddening project, and once in a while when I get the time to just like sit and do research on like nuclear stuff, because inevitably when you do science, even if you're just doing astrophysics, right, looking at far distant planets, it still leads back to the project that we've done. And I just end up thinking to myself what we end up doing with all of what we have right now. We might be still in somewhat of a Cold War, but what would it take to trigger things? And I just want to say one thing. If I could leave you with a little message by the end of this video. I know that 1/3 of my audience is US based, but what is going to happen in the next few days is not just about the US, obviously. It's going to affect the rest of the world because America has such reach everywhere. As an example, here in Denmark, where I live, we have some American bases right now through our allyship through NATO that have been established there. And they are either going to be aiding us in our defenses or aiding the likes of Ukraine in the fight against Russia. And all depending on how things goes, a lot of relations are going to be deterred or made stronger. All that I just kind of wish to tell you guys who are part of my viewership is just to take care of each other. Like, regardless of your political alignment, treat each other as human beings, because this demonization that we have been seeing way too often through either politicians' rhetorics, people online, dehumanizing each other, is wrong, okay? I think that is genuinely something that we can all agree is wrong. We can all have a political disagreement, but we are all human beings. We all kind of need a certain modicum of respect and deserving of love. So that's the message that I'm going to leave to you guys, and yeah, please take that into consideration. That being said, thank you Kurskazan for putting things in perspective of the destructiveness of just one man's project, and of course, as always, our hubris. But that being said, guys, hopefully you found this video to be informative, and of course, if you liked it, don't forget to hit that like button. That being said, wish you all to have a wonderful day. See you guys in the next one. Bye.